Hello, friends. It is episode 90. Can you believe it? Episode 90 of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast. My name is Eric Nance, and I never do this solo anymore because I am joined by my awesome co host, Mike Thomas. Mike, I know we got a lot going on today, but how are you today so far?
I'm doing great. We're doing some early morning recording for a change, which is unusual for us. But episode 90, we got the countdown is on to episode 100. I don't know what we should do to celebrate the centennial episode of the podcast. Maybe change the podcast name. I don't know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, branding's so important for us. Of course it is. Yes, we'll find out. We do have some, I'm sure we'll have some surprises planned for all of you. I've gotten a few requests for certain things, but in due time, of course. But it is time, of course, to dive into our latest issue 2022, week 34, curated by Sam Palmer. And as always, he had tremendous help from our weekly team members and contributors like you all around the world. We knew this was coming, and now they're finally here. All of the recordings, as well as the workshop materials from the recent RStudio Conf, are now available for all of us to listen and watch and catch up on what we missed and relive some of the fond memories. Mike and I have a lot of thoughts on this, and we're going to kind of go in the roundtable style and share our impressions of this. Of course, being at the conference, you can never go to every talk, right? There's always going to be some you have to pick and choose, and some that you'll say you want to catch up on the recordings of. So I did a little catching up as show prep, of course. But of course, listening to these has been a whole lot of fun too. One of the ones I want to talk about and give a good spotlight to is, let's face it, Mike, we know Quarto has gotten a lot of attention in the various wrap ups and the various recordings. Now, Quarto is possible because of the engines that it is in front of from both the R side and the Python side, and yes, even the Julia side, and some of the native functionality of the observable JavaScript functionality. Where all this started is something I want to make sure we call out here. The knitter package is the engine from the R side of compilation. And Sia, the original author of Knitter, all things with the down verse, I call it, was at it again with an amazing talk on the updates that have happened with Knitter. That actually, it was the first time in recent presentations where there wasn't a new down like package, but that's okay because some of the quality of life enhancements that Knitter has enabled Quartal to be launched in such a successful way. And no matter if you want to choose R Markdown or Quartal as your way of compiling reproducible analysis documents, there are some great goodies that have landed in Knitter that I think definitely deserve some praise, such as, of course, the new way of specifying chunk options, the new way of including verbatim code chunks without doing some custom hacks around that, and also being able to call other engines dynamically, even custom ones. If there wasn't like a simple engine already built into Knitter, you can now shell out in a very convenient way to a new command line utility of your choosing and do some real fancy stuff with that. I think eWay deserves a ton of credit for helping enable the next generation of the pipelines in these documents. So I'm really thrilled about that. I think Knitter definitely deserves some attention for sure.
Absolutely. Easy to lose that one underneath all of the Python and Quarto presentations that were going on. But Eway, I mean, he's the GOAT when it comes to reproducible scientific documentation with R, especially what he's put together. It's absolutely incredible. The verbatim options that are now new in Knitter are a big deal to me, at least. I remember trying to essentially write for loops in a chunk to spit out a bunch of plots at once.
Right.
And that used to be a little trickier than it is now with some of these updates, which are great. Maybe I'll pick out a couple of the other, just maybe high level look at some of the other talks that we now have out. A lot was made again of Python and Quarto, but I think if you really do start to dig into the talks, there's still a ton of incredible R content here. And one thing that I noticed was there is a lot of interoperability talks out there. There was one on achieving a seamless workflow between R, Python, and SAS. There were multiple that revolved around R and Power BI, the data visualization product from Microsoft. Tableau in R also had one. And I think it's an interesting, for you and I, Eric, we're such shiny heads that maybe we don't necessarily need to think too much about some of these off the shelf data viz products. But for a lot of folks out there, the learning curve to these data viz products is less steep than shiny can be.
Fair point.
So I
Yep.
think you have some big audiences out there that are leveraging those tools. So it's very, I think, it's a great thing that we have a lot of presentations that are trying to bridge the gap between R and those data viz tools, and see how things can play together, because that's what it's all about, I think, in the R community, is getting as many people to the table as possible. And along those same lines, one talk in particular that I will point out that I really enjoyed, and it's very relevant to a lot of the work that we do at Catchbrook with a lot of financial institutions and insurance institutions that have legacy models in Excel. There is a talk called Model Migration by Johnny Breen,
Ooh,
and
nice.
it is all about migrating those models out of Excel and into a code first approach like R specifically, and all of the benefits that we know you can get by doing that, such as version control and much more reproducibility than you would get if you were doing these things in Excel. And that's an exercise that I see happening right now. I see a lot of need for it to continue to happen, because a lot of the organizations that we work with still do have a lot of models baked into Excel that they are trying to slowly migrate out of Excel. So I think it's a very powerful talk to a wide audience if you are sort of on the industry side like I am.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of the themes and additional talks were, as you touched on a bit earlier, this interoperability between different platforms. It's really important to me to see it's not just about using one specific part of a tool chain, it's how all this integrates together. There were some additional talks about how the team from California's government was able to optimize the response to the COVID pandemic using a unique blend of automated data processing driven by R Markdown, deploying on RStudio Connect on a regular basis, and then custom logging for when data doesn't quite perform the way you expect, and then being able to put a nice front end shiny app to interrogate where these issues are residing. That's an excellent talk to look for as well. I think that's where I learned so much, is being able to see how all this fits together. I kind of liken myself to a bit of a, chef sometimes, of taking these ingredients here, this piece here, and then find a way to blend it together. That's an important part of my daily work. And so being able to engineer that and know which options are available for what use case, there are more than a handful of talks that really dive into those details, which I think are a great way to practically learn what is possible when you're able to blend all this together. So I feel like those were some really unifying themes throughout the scheduled talks. I also want to give a shout out to Kiro Mueller for his DM package talk, because that, if you're dealing with complex data sets that are in databases across multiple tables, this is going to be a really intuitive and easy to navigate way of doing queries across an entire database schema, and not just picking and choosing which tables to interrogate over and over again. So I feel like it's still, I would say it's still early days, but these are things that, again, from somebody that's starting to build more complex data type layouts, this is something I'm going to keep my eye on for sure. And Kuro was really fun to talk to in the breaks during the conference as well. He's got a lot of ideas, and I never get tired of absorbing the knowledge that he has and his team over there as well. So And then, of course, speaking of shiny, we cannot understate the impact and the amazing keynote from Joe Chang. We even touched on a little bit on the last episode, but now that the recording's out, we can really talk even more about this. Where if you thought you knew the history of Shiny, you don't know it the way that Joe talked about it at the keynote. There were things that even the old timers like me who were there from like the first time that Google mailing list was formed that I did not know happened. So the fact that Joe was putting himself out there in ways that I did not expect. I don't think anybody in the audience expected that, except perhaps the Pasa team themselves, but nobody else expected that. We were all blown away by this. And the fact that, yes, Shiny for Python is getting a lot of the press, so to speak, that's a given where the things are landing. But the other enhancements on the R side of things are game changing enhancements. So I'm keep finding the right projects to start trying this out with, like the UI designer, better design in general, which is something I'm trying to get better at because even though I think this app might be just for me in the initial start, inevitably someone accesses it and then it just takes right off. It's a leadership wants it, so you got to think about design, best practices with design as well. So there are lots of nuggets for me to learn from, both from the keynote and the extended talks. But again, the keynote's just amazing, so you have to watch it. If nothing else, you have to watch that.
Absolutely. I've watched it probably 5 or 10 times by now. Oh, I can't get enough of the backstory, and I can't thank Joe enough for all of his work that he's put into over the years and sticking with Shiny and really believing in it. And I'm so grateful, as I know you are, Eric, because it has absolutely changed the course of my career and my life in a lot of ways. So I think we're at the 10-year mark for since the launch of Shiny, which is really, really cool this month to reflect back on where Shiny has come from since it first came out. It's pretty incredible to see all of these different talks around UI design and Shiny Test 2 and all of the tools that we have now available and how mature the ecosystem really has become, but also, you know, what the future could possibly hold because we keep having these new additional tangential tools that improve our Shiny apps. You know, every couple months something pretty cool comes out. That's the beauty of open source, I guess. And you know, one takeaway for me after seeing a lot of these talks beyond Joe's keynote, but looking at some of the new tools we have, like you mentioned the UI design, you know, and just a lot of those other packages as well as Shiny Test 2, is thinking more about all of the different pieces that have to go into a Shiny app, especially if it's going to be a production Shiny app or one that, you know, you're going to share with others in your company, like you mentioned. I think it's a good idea to, from a scoping perspective, to not just think about the app itself and to think about all of the other pieces that have to fit around that to make sure that the app stands on strong footing, if you will. So it's easy to say, oh yeah, I can spin up a Shiny app in a couple hours here and hand it off. But I think it is important now that we are in such a mature ecosystem where Shiny is at today to take into account all of the different things that go into building a good production grade Shiny application, just like some folks may have learned in a particular workshop at the conference.
Well, yes. Oh, I wonder who. Yes. The materials are all online, folks, and that's the other key piece of this is that yes, it is a bit of a bummer that we couldn't record the workshops themselves, but I think if you take a look at the repo where all these materials are stored, there is just absolutely amazing stuff here. And if I wasn't teaching one, I can tell you that I would have been in attendance in probably three of these if I could have cloned myself because they were that good. So, especially shout out to Cedric Schurer's materials on ggplot2 building. Those are just amazing, amazing if you want to power up your visualization skill set. And of course, the tidy models workshops were spectacular. I had a colleague at work that went to that, and she said, "Yeah, these were amazing, and we want to definitely build upon our ML ops engineering based on the principles that she learned at that workshop." So even if you couldn't attend those, there's still a whole lot to learn from, and never say never when you might see some of that stuff again. Hashtag just saying.
Wink, wink.
We love our winks here on the podcast for sure.
Here, two, we're counting it down. It's the final countdown.
And yes, let's round out today's episode where I borrowed this quote from a group of Linux podcasters I listen to, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's very appropriate. The journey is just as important as the destination. Now, that may sound a little corny. I acknowledge it, but think about how every issue of our weekly, we have a section dedicated to all the new packages on CRAN. Get that list one by one. You can take a look at their CRAN page and see what the package is about. That's, of course, a very common destination for package authors, isn't it? But one of those packages in today's issue is called Countdown, authored by Posit's own Garrick Bowie. And on the tin, so to speak, Countdown gives you a simple looking timer that you can throw inside any web based content, such as a presentation, document written, say, R Markdown or Quarto. And of course, you can throw it in Shiny as well, because why not? Now, I used an earlier version of this package in my workshop materials, so I can tell you it definitely is robust. But that's just half the story. The other half of the story, the journey itself, Garrick has authored a terrific post on his blog to share this 3-year kind of saga, so to speak, on how Countdown was born. And yes, it does have roots in RStudio Conf from years ago. So you could say this was conference driven development in its finest form. So, in particular, when Garrick was a learner on the learner side at one of the 2019 workshop Tidyverse Train to Trainer, which was led by Posit's director of learning, Garrick Roman, another person I've had pleasure of talking with in the past, he saw this handy little widget in Garrett's slides that were sprinkled with timers for the learners to complete activities or maybe finish a breakout session and whatnot. And so, of course, Garrick is a big fan of the web based formats like Sheringan and others. So he saw an opportunity to try to throw this into a web based format and expand his JavaScript skill set, which he was kind of learning at that time. Now, this started kind of quietly, but there's nothing like a little enthusiastic publicity from members of the Tidyverse team to nudge Garrick along with some future quality of life enhancements that definitely brought Countdown into a bit more visibility with respect to Posit itself. Now, as for the JavaScript side of the package, this is where I applaud Garrick's honesty here. He admits that in this earlier version of Countdown, he didn't quite grasp the ins and outs of what that JavaScript code was actually doing. And boy, do I feel seen saying that, because I do have a couple apps where I found this little widget online. Even I did this for my workshop. I can't tell you exactly why it expanded the picture that when you click on it, but darn it, it works. So I threw it in.
We
Ooh.
would never copy and paste JavaScript code from Stack Overflow and just stick it right in our apps. Would we, Eric?
Are we recording this, Mike? Uh-oh. Oh, well, exposed. I'm exposed. Well, luckily, I'm not the only one, apparently. Now, since that initial release of Countdown on GitHub, it's safe to say that Garrick himself has learned what I'll call the JavaScript force, so to speak. He has become much more proficient with this. And in fact, he taught the JavaScript for Shiny Users Workshop a year later in 2020. So that should tell you something. So combined with that larger user base of colleagues and, fellow workshop instructors who like using that package, Garrick plunged back into the backend, this JavaScript backend, to solve a few nagging issues in preparation for this year's RStudio Conf. We won't go over the great detail about this, but I can tell you that he found a much safer way for the countdown, if you start it and say you had to navigate to a different page or a different tab in your computer as you're displaying it to your learners, in the old way, that method of like switching away could have some unintended consequences because the browsers of today's landscape, if you don't have a tab and focus, it's going to try to kind of give it a little rest, give it a little sleep, so to speak, to try and conserve resources. Well, that can cause havoc if you need something to actually work, even when it's not quote unquote in focus. So Garrick saw that issue and took it upon himself to write his own custom JavaScript class, complete with a few different methods to make sure that this timer was going to start, stop, and keep going no matter what the condition is in terms of what the presenter was showing on the screen. So it's a fascinating take to go from a built-in functionality that he did in the previous version to now this custom solution. Again, made possible because he took that investment and time to learn a bit more about what was really happening under the hood. Something I definitely need to learn from. I'm getting nudged a little bit, if I dare say so
I was
myself.
going to say, I could have used that JavaScript for Shiny workshop that he taught.
Yes, well, materials of that are online as well. But yes, that was one of those moments where I was in the event itself. I could follow, I think, the first day pretty well, and then I admit, through my thinking, it took a while for me to adjust back to it. But that's when I went back to material. I was like, okay, now I know why he did it. Now I know why he built this HTML widget. And to be honest, this countdown package is another great introduction to that as well. We're not looking at a whole complex operation here. Not to trivialize it, but we're not looking at something that's going to make your eyes gloss over by looking at the complex app code here. But this is a great way to see how you can put these principles in action. Now, we can't leave out Shiny in this because, of course, if Garrick's going to write this package, he's going to make it, have some nice bells and whistles for Shiny itself, because now through the back end and exposing an input to the Shiny process, you can control programmatically the state of the timer in your app. You can put a little button to say start and stop. You could change the time very quickly. Possibilities are almost endless here. And then, if say you're at the situation where you're maybe on the sideline and you have maybe lightning talks at a conference or at a meetup, and you need to time each speaker because you got to get things moving, there is a built-in countdown underscore app function that gives you just a full screen timer. Perfect for putting it on the phone or putting it in another secondary display where you can easily keep track of all this. And just that timer itself's got some nice bells and whistles for customization as well, including if, say, you wanted to bookmark the state of this to do only like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you can, thanks to Shiny's bookmarkable state feature, take that state of it and take the URL and plug it in somewhere else down the road so you don't lose your preferred timer settings. Yes, we're all talking about a timer with this, but think of the principles we've outlined here. These are all things that we can learn from as we engineer some really nifty fit for purpose packages. So I loved reading this. You can tell I geek out with this stuff, but it was great to read about Garrick's journey with this. So yes, it's a timer, but it's a fascinating timer and how it got there, if I do say so myself.
I agree. It gives me a little bit of MacGruber, like Saturday Night Live vibes with the countdown. But I think it's a fantastic resource, especially for education purposes or giving presentations. Really, really cool. And beyond Garrick's blog, just telling you how the Shiny works, there is, of course, a link to an accompanying working Shiny app with all the bells and whistles that allow you to start the timer, stop the timer, buttons to reset the timer, bump it up 15 seconds, bump it down 15 seconds, and really concise code around that, which is pretty incredible. I really enjoyed reading Garrick's blog post and sort of seeing the evolution of Countdown itself and the package and how it started, and how for a couple years there, which is something that resonates with me and maybe some other R package authors and just open source in general, there was an R package that worked, but kept him up at night a little bit because of some of the code that was cobbled together in there. And, like we talk about all the time, though, open source is this incredible thing where as consumers we get a lot, but as producers of open source content, you don't get as much as the consumers get back. You're sort of doing it out of the goodness of your own heart for the for the most part. So it was super relatable to me to see that it did take him a while to update the package, and he actually includes the old JavaScript code and the new JavaScript code, which for me, as somebody who's, like I said, copied and pasted a lot of JavaScript and just edited that from, wherever I'm getting it on Stack Overflow for my, particular apps in Shiny or tables in Shiny to do something that doesn't come out of the box. For me, actually looking at this JavaScript code, pretty easy to read. Also well commented, which is nice. So it makes me feel like maybe someday I could get there as well. But, beyond just releasing the updates to the package, sort of hearing the backstory in Garrick's blog as well is, I think, really powerful and something that's pretty cool to see along with a package update, to actually remember that there is a human being behind that who's working as hard as they can to incorporate changes and provide you with the best end product API that they possibly can. So I'm excited to incorporate the Countdown app incorporate Countdown into maybe some of my Shiny apps. And I did not realize, now I'm taking a look at it, that there is that Countdown_app function that just spits out a beautiful big full screen countdown for you. So very, very useful.
Yep, there are many different ways you could use this. So obviously we talk about, conference or workshop venues, but hey, there could be a timer for almost anything you like. And yes, Garrick is not the only one that is into this conference driven development. And in fact, an earlier post that he authored, which may or may not have been a highlight, I can't recall, was how he was using image processing to get the speaker profile pictures for our studio conf and be able to put them onto the website. So yeah, totally geeking out with R and image processing as well. So of course, this is why this company is so cool. You get to see all these great tooling that just kind of organically get built every year because of conferences. Well, I can relate. I can relate. So
Absolutely. No, I think this is a great compliment to all the things that we have with Quarto now. I feel like this plus our new, what's the JavaScript library for making slides with Quarto nowadays?
Reveal.js.
Reveal.js. That's what it is. I feel like I can stick these countdowns right into my Reveal.js presentation potentially.
You can.
And they
I
will
guarantee
go hand
it.
in hand beautifully.
Yes. I lived that. I lived that life for my slides, and nothing broke. So, of all the things
Awesome.
that didn't break, that was not one of the things that broke. It was Wi-Fi that broke, but that's a different story altogether. Yes, but can't please everything, or you can't get everything right. But yeah, fascinating journey. So, of course, links to that, links to where the recordings are in the episode show notes, and as well as the full issue itself, where we have a whole lot more content than we could talk about. But of course, we got to tidy up here things a little bit. But I do want to put a little spotlight on another one that kind of flew under the radar a little bit, a package called Drawer. Now, of course, that may not be the most descriptive name of what it's about, but I did a little digging into this, and it is an HTML widget package that could be plugged into our Markdown, Quarto, Shiny, whatever have you, that allows you to edit an image directly. And when I say edit, I mean maybe like draw a little circle on or annotate a little bit, do a little drawing upon it. And what's interesting about this is that this was originally a component of a larger, I don't know if pipeline is the right word, but a larger collection called System Pipe Shiny that's geared towards reproducible analysis through a even larger framework called System Pipe. Now, rather than forcing users into that entire workflow just to utilize, say, this particular image processing, the team behind this has now taken a modular approach where if you just want that image processing, have yourself that drawer package. And then maybe if you like that, you might be interested in what the rest of the system pipe shiny component set is all about. I can tell you that the fact that they took out this particular module into a separate package actually makes me more interested in what they're doing with System Pipe Shiny instead of just kind of letting this be maybe hidden in the back end of this overall pipeline. So I think just the approach of that itself is something I try to learn from as I build internal tooling where maybe I have a large Shiny app that does a whole bunch of custom processing with statistical analysis, but maybe I have users that are just interested in maybe one particular piece of it, whether it's related to Shiny or not. So what I try to do now is just make a separate package out of some of that work so they can use that however they choose. But if they want to come for my Shiny front end, yeah, come and stay for the Shiny front end. So I thought that was pretty fascinating to see. So I'll be taking a look at that whole System Pipe Shiny ecosystem probably later on.
Very cool shout out. Well, actually, under the videos and podcasts section of our weekly this week, the first bullet point says listen to the Our Weekly Highlights podcast.
Boom.
So that's a great one to click on if you do happen to find yourself on the ourweekly.org page. But another highlight that I really enjoyed, which is sort of the blog mindset of, hey, I'm struggling with this on my own laptop. I finally figured it out. So I'm going to make a blog post to save everybody else from having to go through the pain that I went through. Those are my favorite blog posts. Is from Sebastian Rochette, who's from the Think R team. They do awesome work. And it's the installation. It's all about the installation of R 4.2 on Ubuntu 22.041 LTS and tips for installing spatial packages like SF and Terra on that particular setup. He has a really great list of all the bash commands and all the other packages that you will need to install through apt-get install commands on the command line of your Ubuntu machine to make sure that you have a perfect setup for doing geospatial analysis on that Ubuntu machine with R 4.2. It's something that resonates with me. I'm still hanging around on versions of R 4.1, and I do need to pull the trigger and finally upgrade to R 4.2 one of these days. So I may be coming back to this blog post very soon.
Yes, and as the Linux geek here, I always like seeing this. This is a part of our community that admittedly may not get the most attention, but I think lately this has become a lot more focused because it's not just about installing this on a typical Linux distro like Ubuntu. This is also valuable for your container setups too if you're into the Docker ecosystem. So there's lots of nuggets to take away here. And yes, Ubuntu 22.04 is the next long-term support release, which means that this is going to be supported by the vendor behind it, Canonical, for a good 5, 6, 7 years. I forget their exact timing, but you can be rest assured that you can stick with this for a long time. So yes, if you can upgrade to the latest and greatest, there's a whole bunch of fun stuff in the kernel as well that might be helpful to the data scientists out there. And yes, I always like talking about this. So yeah, credit to ThinkR for keeping the Linux train going in the R community. I always love to see it.
If you're doing any cloud development, I mean, that's got to be the way to go nowadays. I couldn't imagine spinning up a cloud Windows instance. I don't even think that's possible. Thank goodness.
Don't just don't. The opinions expressed on the Our Weekly Highlights podcast may not be reflective of the whole Our Weekly organization. I just have to put that disclaimer in there. Yes. How much more trouble can I get into? Well, maybe we should wrap it up then, shall we? But so you can find all the great additional content in this issue. Just go to ourweekly.org. That's the best place to go. You're going to see everything from this issue and all previous issues as well. And if you like to see content featured on Our Weekly, just send us a pull request. You'll see a link to the GitHub repo at the upper corner of the page. Our curators will be more than happy to review your pull request and get it into the draft for the upcoming issue. So thank you again so much for joining us. And of course, I can't leave here without, giving our listeners what they want. Mike, I know you're on a lot of adventures these days. Where can people follow you online?
Follow me on Twitter at Mike_Ketchbrook, KETCHBROOK.
Awesome stuff. I am at the Rcast, and hopefully not causing too much more trouble that my voice may have just did earlier. But yes, I will be tweeting some cool developments coming up in the near future. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and we will be back with another edition of our weekly highlights next week.